The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB-FM. Thank you for listening.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Human trafficking. Just the words can bring chills and a lot of questions. But did you know, according to experts, Hampton Roads is a hub of human trafficking? Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and this week on Hampton Roads Voices, we'll talk about human trafficking, what it is, who's affected, and what we can do about it. We'll talk to guest experts and a woman who was a victim of sex trafficking. And, of course, we definitely want to hear from you. That's next on Hampton Roads Voices, Human Trafficking on Hot 91.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're talking about human trafficking. And just sometimes when we hear the words, that can bring chills and a lot of questions. But according to experts, Hampton Roads is one of the hubs of human trafficking. So today on Hampton Roads Voices, we'll be answering and asking questions and answering them. What is it? Who's affected, and what we can do about it. And we have our guest experts on the line with us to answer your questions. The number to call in, 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. What do you need to know about human trafficking? Are you familiar with the topic? And what do you think in terms of solutions we can do about it? 757-823-9110. First of all, on the line, we have Tanya Street. She is the founder of Identifiable Me. Tanya, thank you so much for being here on Hampton Roads Voices.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
And then also on the line, Christy Wells, who is the CEO of Safe House Project. Christy, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start, Christy, with you. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and some information about the Safe House Project.
Sure. So, again, my name's Christy Wells. I'm the CEO of Safe House Project. And Safe House Project really got its roots in Norfolk out of a Christian hip-hop label that went to South Africa and saw a specific need to raise funds to build a safe house to protect kids that were at risk of sex trafficking. But they came back to the United States. They got to work. They produced an album with 100% of the proceeds going towards benefiting the safe house. But in the process, I came on board and began working with them, and we started to really take a deeper look into the U.S. and understanding the problem here, not just the issue of sex trafficking, but trying to figure out what was the deepest need in the fight against sex trafficking. And that's really where Safe House Project was truly born, as an organization that exists to raise awareness of sex trafficking, but more importantly on our end, raise funds to help build up a network of safe houses that provide really restoration and reintegration for sex trafficking survivors. To help you understand a little bit about this, I won't dive too much into the issue here, but there are 300,000 American children that we know of that are trafficked for sex. Of those, 1% of them is ever rescued. But without a safe place to go upon rescue and upon coming out of that life, 80% of victims end up back in the hands of their traffickers. And so the only way that we have seen is one of the measurable ways to move the needle in the fight against sex trafficking is to increase the number of places for rescue and restoration and refuge for these women and girls as they are coming out of the life, so that they can be given opportunities to do something more because they are fighters and they are survivors. So really we exist to build up a network of safe houses across the U.S. For sex trafficking survivors.
Amazing. There's so much unpacking that we'll do with that. And Tanya,
Sure.
Tanya Street, tell us a little bit about you and your organization, Identifiable Me.
Absolutely. My name is Tanya Street, Tanya Gould Street, and I am actually a survivor of domestic sex trafficking. And so I started telling my story 12 years ago, and then in telling my story, I was able to just kind of put my story together in pieces that provided training for law enforcement and social service providers. And also I was able to start my own nonprofit, Identifiable Me, and where I'm just really take in the wholeness piece of my life, like, what happens after coming out of something so traumatic. And, so having learned just some pieces through my own experience and able to offer that. So 2 kids are being trafficked now here in the Hampton Roads. My organization is partnered with CHKD. We provide mentorship to kids who are trafficked and their families. I'm also a member of the United States Advisory Council for Human Trafficking, a part of the National Survivor Network, and I also advise and on boards to various human trafficking organizations and provide consultant work, to trainings, and keynotes.
Fascinating. Again, so much to talk about. So let's just get started. Let me give the phone number again for our listeners. 757-823-9110 is the number to call. If you have a question for either Christy or for Tanya, if you're curious about how one gets into the situation, what are the solutions, and more about Safe House Project, 757-823-9110. So, Christy, I'll start with you and just ask a basic question. What is involved in sex trafficking? What does that mean by definition, in case someone says, I really don't know what that is?
Sure. I think the best way to describe it is really how it is described by legal standards, which is the thing I want people to understand is that this does not always mean moving a person. Many people, I actually live in Southern California currently. I'm from Norfolk, but many people here believe that means somebody's going to grab their kid and run across the border. Mm-hmm. And the reality is sex trafficking simply means the commercial sexual exploitation of an individual using force, fraud, or coercion. But in the case of a minor being trafficked, if they're being used for commercial exploitation, including prostitution or pornography, it is considered trafficking because a child is inherently vulnerable. In most states, that is how it is defined.
Okay.
So it really involves the commercial sale of a person. And so sometimes what you'll see is somebody who has been forced into a situation or they have been coerced into a situation. So how they got there can vary, but the marker is that they are being commercially sexually exploited. Somebody can be, sure. So I think one piece that's also important to realize is that somebody can be trafficked all while living under their own roof. So 40% of the trafficking victims in the United States on average are being trafficked by a family member. So this can all be happening from the child's own home.
Now, when you go ahead.
And I speak to the child piece more because those are some of the stats that we've been able to get our finger on a little bit more, but that does not limit. This can still happen and does happen in the adult space. So when I say child, it's simply because those are the stats that we've drilled down on.
Absolutely. Now, when you say commercially and sexually exploited, is this a payment involved with that, especially when you said under the a family member and so forth? Is a person being paid? Is it prostitution? Exactly. Explain that just a little bit clearer. Is this prostitution?
Well, I think it looks to a lot of people like prostitution, and I can, and I'm only going to answer that question halfway because I think Tanya has a really great way of shaping this and framing this to help people understand. But to put it blankly, yes, it involves the commercial sale of a child. So they might be a child that somebody thinks they are buying, a prostitute who is over the age of 18, but let's be real, no John ever says, how old are you, honey? Right. So unless they're looking for a younger person. So it can be presented as a prostitute, and a child can be presented, or somebody can be presented as somebody who is willingly doing this. Or we had a case in North Carolina where it was a 13-year-old little girl who had been pulled out of a trafficking situation. She'd been trafficked for 3 years, since the age of 10, and the person that was selling her for sex 40 times a day was her grandmother. And her grandmother sold her to pay the bills because her mom was too STD-ridden and drug-addicted to be of use. So this can look many different ways.
Amazing.
But I want you guys to volley that question to Tanya as well, because I think she can give a more thorough lens on it too.
Absolutely. Let me get the number again, 757-823-9110. We are talking about sex trafficking, a really difficult subject to talk about, and yet it's so important to really unpack this and to really dive into the nuggets that are a part of this. Again, 757-823-9110. What questions do you have in terms of this subject? And again, we just heard from Christy Wells, CEO of Safe House Project. Now, Tanya, tell us your story, please.
Well, I'm not going to specifically talk about my story. It's not, what I want to do, because that would take up a lot of your time. Mm-hmm. But people can also, find my story. Cox 11 did a wonderful documentary a few years ago on my story. And, of course, I'll talk about, just kind of pieces of it here on the station. But I did want to follow up with Christy, when we're talking about what prostitution is versus someone who's trafficked. So, what I like to remind people is that they're seeing it, because, prostitution, we all know that, right? We all know prostitution, right? We know what it can look like. And so, but what I want to challenge people to think about is that person that you see or that you are aware of that is prostituting, are they able to just get up the next morning and completely do something on their own free will without having to answer to someone? Or something. And so, for me, that's what it looks like. And when it comes to, like Christy said, when it comes to kids, kids that are under 18, they shouldn't be thinking about having to get up the next day and selling their bodies to buyers. That's just not an option for them that they should have, because children should have a right to play, a right to grow, a right to learn, and have the best things in life, especially when they're under 18. Mm-hmm. And when you're over 18, the other challenge I like to say is there's a lot of numbers that we hear as far as the percentage of women in particular that have been sexually abused. And they are, over 18 and making that type of choice, to sell their bodies and get paid for it without it being organized as far as having a trafficker or AKA pimp to help them with that. And so, it's so, my thing that I tell people is, can that person just get up in the morning and decide, what, I think I'm going to do something different with my life? Because you can, or I can decide I'm going to change my life. But if they're in a controlling situation and they're vulnerable and they feel trapped or stuck, in that situation, they can't just wake up the next day and say, what, this is not working for me. I'm going to choose in my own free will to do something different with my life without the threat of or fear of someone coming after me if I decide to change.
Absolutely. And we'll look at that on the other side of the break. But again, that was Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me. The number to call in with questions, comments, concerns, solutions, 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we're talking about human trafficking. We have on the line Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me, and the CEO of Safe House Project, Christy Wells. Now, ladies, right before the break, and Tanya, I'm going to come right back to you. You were giving us some information about prostitution versus sex trafficking. And the point that really was so poignant for me and probably a lot of my listeners was that in those situations, there's not a choice. We say, okay, today is this particular day. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do something different. And I have choices in my life. But you're saying in these situations, they have no choices. And that's such a big part of the puzzle. Is that correct?
Right. No, that is correct. And it's also important to understand that even though someone may look, because even, when it came to just talking about my story and even some of the kids that I work with, people, adults as well, you can look and say, well, they have a choice, and there were times that I could have made a choice to leave. But because of the type of manipulation that was, how that was brought to me, I didn't understand that I had free will.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I use free will, for language so people can understand, am I able to use my own power and stand it and then choose, and so because of the manipulation, the coercion, and, the control, the mind control that's there, that has been happening, is not something that happens overnight. I like to remind parents, especially, when you look at someone who is taken, like the movie, someone is taken, it doesn't happen that way most of the time. Most kids or adults, they know their trafficker. Mm. They know their pimp. They know them. So this took time to develop this relationship, and so to just come out of that and to choose, you don't feel that free will to do that because of the type of coercion and manipulation that's there.
So does this trafficker or this pimp take his or her time to develop this relationship, knowing that sometimes they have to move somewhat slowly to have the child or the woman, I guess, in some cases, to get to know them well. So then when they want to put them out there, they already trust this person. So is it a slow moving relationship sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, all relationships are like that. Relationships that go well, mm-hmm. or, run a little deeper, and so, and if you think it's a business, when you think about what business people do to keep their money coming in, they have to be on top of things. So if it means taking your time with a customer because you're going to have them long term, you're going to manipulate that. Manipulation is not a bad thing when we think about just the term manipulating. We do that every day to get what we want. And so, so it's using that same psychology to, to get their, the people that they're going to use to exploit. Mm. So it's a business. It's a money-making business. And so, as any other business, as, products you see on TV, I like to, just remind people of that all the time. You may try, trying to go on a diet, and then, maybe you get an Arby's commercial, so, we all can understand what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to be exploited. And that's why I try to get people to understand the similarities and the commonalities between that, because if you can understand that, then you can understand how someone can get into a situation like that without the judgment.
Mm. Christy, you mentioned at the beginning of the show around 300,000, did you say, kids were trafficked in the U.S.? Is that the stat you gave us?
Yes.
Okay. Where are they coming from? Yes, we've established that many of these children and women know their pimps or their trafficker, but mostly where are they coming from? Is it the situation where a parent is on drugs, or as you mentioned, someone trying to pay the bills? Describe that person. I know there's no typical person. They're very, very specific things, but give us an overview. Where are they coming from? Who are they?
Sure. Well, I think it's really easy to limit the image of a victim to somebody of a certain age or race or socioeconomic status or gender. But really, the big picture I want to paint is it can be anybody, because traffickers, to Tanya's point, traffickers exploit the vulnerable. Now, yes, could they be somebody who is in the foster care system, or who is a runaway, or who is a throwaway, which there's a very distinct difference, or somebody who is a refugee, or somebody who comes from lower income, or somebody of a certain race? Yes, I mean, is the answer. It can meet all of the things that you expect it to meet. You can say we have twice as many African American girls are trafficked than white girls, or we can say the LGBTQ community has in the Pacific Northwest has a higher ratio than anybody to be trafficked. It can be anybody. There have been cases of somebody who lived in kind of an upper middle class suburbia area, and she was raped. They videoed it, and then they threatened her father's high profile career if she didn't comply with their demands. And so for 2 years, while living under her parents' roof, she was sold. These boys would pick her up and take her to motels, and they would sell her and then bring her back home. There are military children that are that are exploited, and because they're vulnerable, because they're moved and they're looking for friends, and a trafficker will look for that vulnerability of a child who is lonely, or a child who is bullied, or a child who is in an unstable family, and they will find that vulnerability and exploit it. And so I think, again, it can look many different ways, and if you want to, sometimes people want to pigeonhole it to say, oh, no, this doesn't exist in my community. It can only exist in low-income communities. If that's what people want to believe, then that's what they're going to find. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, like I said, I live in Southern California, and in the county I am in, it's one of the surrounding areas that has the highest population of homeless, and it's also one of the wealthiest populations. But I can tell you that trafficking touches every single zip code in this county. Nobody is immune, and I think that's the message more than anything that I hope parents understand, and I hope even mentors understand, is that no child, we've all been vulnerable at some point in our lives.
Right. None
of us have ever been in a position where we can say, I was never lonely, or I was never sad, or I was never without something that somebody could have exploited. So everybody's vulnerable. Anybody has the potential to be a victim, which is why this is such a silent epidemic, is because we don't understand who the victims can be.
Now, you said there's a big difference between a runaway and a throwaway. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. So from the way we always put it to people, you do have those runaways who are kind of, the way that they're labeled, quite honestly, is tragic, but they're labeled as that bratty teen that just doesn't want to abide by their parents' rules, is most of the time how runaways are labeled. But throwaways many times would be, a good example would probably be a little girl whose mom may have died. Her dad gets remarried to somebody who doesn't like her. And the dad chooses the girlfriend or the new wife over the daughter, and kind of forces her out and basically says, you're 15, go fend for yourself. And so they're thrown away with really no place to go, but not really captured by, say, a foster care system because they have a parent. The parent has just, for all intents and purposes, relinquished their right, just not in the legal sense.
Very interesting. So that's what perhaps what it looks like on that side of it. Again, our number 757-823-9110. This is Hampton Roads Voices. We're talking about human and sex trafficking. So, Tanya, if Christy is saying that that's what the victim, if I can use that word, looks like, what does the perpetrator look like? Again, I know I'm asking about generalities. They're very specific things. But just so I can lay this foundation for our listeners, describe for us, what does that trafficker look like? Can we identify him or her?
Yeah, I do want to just add to Chrissy's point, about kids who run away. Okay, the other thing is when you look at percentages, especially with the kids that I work with, a lot of them were sexually abused and in their families, and so they run away from home because they just don't want to tell their family about it, but they don't want to stay in that situation. And I get that so often. Like, most of my kids have come from a situation like that. So they're just running away from their situation because they don't want to dismantle, their family. Because, so who doesn't want to belong to a family? So it's not that they don't just want to, be there. They want to savor that. And so instead of facing it, for many different reasons, they will run, from their home to not continue to be abused in that way. And that happens a lot in our communities. Sexual abuse is not talked about, and that is the issue. So when you think about, well, how could kids stay in this trafficking situation? Well, they were sexually abused from the time they were, this age to, till they ran away. So in their mind, they can deal with another situation as long as they have that sense of belonging.
Right.
That sense of, acceptance. They don't care where they get it from. You want that. I want that. We all want to be accepted and wanted and valued, to have that sense of belonging. So who cares where I get it from? I just want it.
Right.
And so I just wanted to put that out there too, because that is what I see the most. I see the sexual abuse that has happened in the home and it was never dealt with. So there's never that sense of justice where someone loves me enough to really take care of me. And so, I'm going to take care of myself. And that's the attitude that I get from a lot of kids who we find, in the situation. They're like, I can take care of myself. And it's a true feeling for them because they've had to anyway. And so, and as far as, a trafficker, and I just want to remind, in our culture, what a pimp looks like, it would be, it just could be anyone. They're female traffickers, male traffickers, transgender. There's no specific look about it, and so you can, Google traffickers, and you'll find, different types of just people. It's all about, what it looks like is someone who wants to exploit or use someone who's not aware of their own pain or who's not aware of their own vulnerabilities. And so because they recognize that, they understand that they can use them in that space to make money for themselves.
Absolutely.
And
that vulnerability
so it's anyone
piece,
who fits that, that category.
Mm-hmm. And that vulnerability piece is so important. So 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110 will allow you to get into the conversation. This is Hampton Roads Voices. We're talking about human and sex trafficking on Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Benita Adams, and today on Hampton Roads Voices, we thank you for joining us, and we are talking about human and sex trafficking, finding our girls. On the line, our guests are Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me, and the CEO of Safe House Project, Christy Wells. And so, ladies, we've been talking a lot about who is affected by this, who's involved with this. And you had told us, of course, the situations in terms of who might be trafficked or prostituted or so forth. But I could hear one of our listeners or some of our listeners say, how can I keep my kids safe? I thought about that during the break. I'll go with you, Tanya, first, and then Christy, I'll come to you. So we're saying this is a major issue. This is very important. How do we keep our kids safe?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, as a survivor, I had kids myself. And so really what I did was just looked at my life and how I was guided and reared by my parents and what the breakdown was and just did things differently. So I remembered pushing my family away. And actually what I needed them to do was to come closer to me, So, I like to tell parents, although your teens may be pushing you away, that's not necessarily what they need. You're their parent. Move in closer, make yourself approachable and available to them because, traffickers don't discriminate, right? And they will give them what they need because they understand that need, like I said earlier, belonging. And so if that's provided for in the home in a way that the child needs, why would a child look out anywhere else? And if someone approaches them looking for that type of vulnerability, they won't find it. So that's why I like to just encourage parents to really bring their kids in, be approachable so that their kids can come to them and talk to them about anything. I know parents say, well, I'm not my child's friend. I don't want to be friends with them. So, and I understand that concept. However, we are our child's teacher.
Yes.
And I understood that. If my kids are going to learn something about the world, they are going to learn it themselves. But as they're growing, I want them to learn those things from me, first. And then they'll continue to grow.
You're absolutely right about that, Tanya, because there will come to a point sometimes with a parent and a child where that child says, well, my friend said this, or somebody else said that, or this group over here, or a teacher or another person. And you've really got to be there because there are going to be times I have adult children and I have a 3-year-old, and there are times, especially when I was raising my 3 adult children, it wasn't all warm and fuzzy and butterflies and rainbows. There were times it was like, this can't be my kid because they're acting totally crazy here. But you've got to stay in there. You've got to do that hard work. And when they push you away, and they will many times, middle school, high school, they start to push you away and they think you don't know anything, Mom. I don't even know what you're talking about. And I want to hear from this person over here. You've still got to dig your heels in and say, look, let me tell you, really, I'm here for you. I believe in you. Come and talk to me. My son went through a period where he started answering in one words. Yes, no, good, okay. And I had to say, okay, all righty. I know he used to talk, but he's this one word, but that's okay. I'm going to keep at it and keep at it. And so go ahead.
Parents don't tell their stories to their kids, so they hide things because they feel like, in my opinion, they feel like if I tell my kids what I did, then they're going to do it, or they're not going to respect me, but everything that I've gone through was a life lesson for me, and my kids came through me.
Right.
So they're a part of that life lesson as well. And so why hide anything from them when they can learn something from it? If I see life as lessons and experiences as opposed to, something so negative, then I'm not afraid to share those things with my kids because I know that they'll learn from it. I want them to. I didn't go through all of that for nothing.
Absolutely.
I did go through it for myself, but here, I did that with my kids. This is what happened to me, and this was what I was thinking, and so when I said earlier about making yourself approachable, that is what I mean. So kids are going to come to you if they feel like you understand them.
If you understand.
Deeply.
And even if you don't, you can say to them, I'm trying to understand. I don't completely get this, but I'm going to at least try. And are you approachable? I'm asking our listeners, are you approachable to your kids as their teacher, as their mentor, no matter what phase or age that they're in, that you're teaching them these life lessons? 757-823-9110. We'd love for you to join the conversation. 757-823-9110. How are you keeping your kids safe? So, Christy, same question. How do we keep our kids safe?
Well, I'll answer this. Tanya has children that are older than mine, so I will answer this from the perspective of raising kids in a digital age. Because to Tanya's point, so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, I think we've got 66% of kids victims know their trafficker beforehand. So what we're looking at isn't, all of us were raised with the idea of stranger danger, of watch out for the creepy man in the white van down the street. Don't go that way. And while that's still a very valid perspective of just general safety, you have to understand that traffickers are getting into your home without ever coming through your front door. And they are engaging with kids and beginning many of these grooming techniques, sometimes not in a public space. It is in a digital space. And that's where, bullying used to happen on the playgrounds when we were kids. And there were certain things that happened externally when we were all young. But the reality is many of those things have turned internal and are happening in digital spaces. Girls are getting pickup lines from guys on digital spaces. Bullying is happening on digital spaces. Traffickers are finding their victims on digital spaces. And so I think one of the great things a parent can do is, understand internet safety. They're actually one of the resources we point people to a lot is love146.org. I think they've got a lot of great information on there for parents and for teens about internet safety. It's knowing the apps that are being used that are making teens or youth vulnerable.
Give us that one more time, Christy. What was that called? One more time, please.
It's love146.org.
So that's LOVE, love146.org? Okay, excellent. I just want to make sure our listeners heard that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and so I think understand the digital space, understand the apps that your kids are on, and how, I've got young children who don't have the brain function to decipher who is good and who is bad. And so I have made the personal decision to disable chat features until I can get them to the point where we can start having conversations about when you're on, you're only talking to your friends. Because just because you're talking to who you think is a friend of a friend of a friend, the reality is you don't know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And so teaching our kids, protecting them when they can't protect themselves, but then also educating them when you do allow those things into their world on how they can be vigilant, on what things they do and do not say in a digital space, who they begin chatting with, who they allow into their digital bedroom, if you will. Mm-hmm. I think that's so important for parents to understand. I think the other thing is if the hackles on the back of your neck stand up, that pay attention. We've got a number of police officers and FBI guys that we work with, and they said you'd be shocked how many times when we finally find the parent, they say, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how to talk to him about it. And it might have been that the something was wrong began with being bullied, but then it progressed to a trafficker saw what was happening and began building, grooming them and building that trust relationship. Mm-hmm. But if the parents have the ability to step in and intervene, and to Tanya's point, pull in when the kid is trying to pull away, that you might have the ability to help heal a vulnerability before it gets worse and they do become exposed to a trafficker. So if the hackles on the back of your neck stand up, pay attention, parents. That's really... You're ingrained with a protective DNA for a reason.
Absolutely, that intuition. We have a caller on the line. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your question? What is your name, please? And where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name is Terrell Garner, and I'm calling from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Okay, Terrell, what is your question or comment for our guests?
Yes, my question is, I'm a military veteran. I've been pretty much all over the world and I've seen a lot of that, what you guys are talking about, the trafficking. But my thing is, now that I'm back, I would like to be a voice or a hand helping in the community, but I really don't know how do I go about doing that or getting associated with organization or a program to help some of the youth in our community. Mm-hmm. And I was just wanting to know how could I be of help, if any.
Oh, Terrell, that is such a good question. Thank you for calling. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Christy, wonderful lead into what we had talked about before. Terrell wants to get involved. He wants to help. Direct him, please.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to ask that because Tanya knows so many of the local organizations that really tie into helping youth specifically. I'm going to volley that piece of the question to her first, and then I'll talk about kind of our end and how he could possibly get involved with helping the Safe House Project.
Excellent.
Tanya, do you have some thoughts there?
Tanya.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
There is a couple things. And first I would say, what I talk to people a lot about is that a lot of people are well-intended. Their intentions are good. However, they may not be at a place to really help victims, kids who are just coming out. And so what I like to say to people, like that, if you just like think about, where you are in your space. And I like to say we like to create a space, that's safe within ourselves. And so my first thing is always make sure your heart is whole. Make sure any trauma that you have yourself has been dealt with, and make sure you've done that for yourself. And then also make sure that the people that you influence, whether it be at work or your school teacher or, you have kids around me or your nephews or nieces, you're doing something there, because what we forget is that it's a us and them, or there's this divide, and we forget that, trafficking happens everywhere. And if it happens to one person, it's not cool. You know what I mean? So it's happening everywhere around us. So understand that you are helping if you're taking care of yourself, and if you're taking care of the people around you, because you're taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so know that you're doing good work there, and that is enough. If you want to reach out even further, there are organizations that are helpful in doing that. And so right now here in the Hampton Roads area, we unfortunately don't have a lot of organizations yet. Human trafficking is new, and so teaching people how to be trauma-informed and victim-centered, using a victim-centered approach, is still a process with us. Now, in particular, my organization, identifiableneeds.org, is my website, but you can actually email me at Tanya at identifiableneeds. My website is down this week. I'm getting it rebuilt. But so Tanya at identifiableneeds.org. I do have a mentorship program, but you would have to go through extensive training to actually work with this population. I work with CHKD. CHKD does a wonderful job with working with kids, and you can always call CHKD and ask how you can help there. And then there are task force that you could be a part of. You can do a community awareness event, like say in your area, if you feel like this is something that you see. A lot of us, we have civic leagues, so you can bring in law enforcement, ask law enforcement to come and talk about trafficking in your community so that people are aware that it's happening there, because now law enforcement has to be engaged and say, yes, it does happen in our community, and this is what you can do, and this is how you need to report. And so community engagement is key.
So there are various areas, such as the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughter. I like that. And then our civic leagues and various, and that's a good idea, having police officers, perhaps law enforcement officers come into your schools or your churches or places of worship and things like that. Again, we're hearing Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me. And the question was, how can the person get involved? From our last caller, 757-823-9110 is the number to call. So, Christy, you want to piggyback off of what Tanya has said?
Sure. So I think there's a few different ways that if somebody is wanting to say, how do I holistically volunteer to answer any piece of the problem of human trafficking, I think I see it as maybe a few different ways. Number one is this, there wouldn't be a supply if there wasn't a demand. And there has got to be a group of men and protectors rise up to speak against the demand. And Safe House Project is run by a group of military spouses, so all of our husbands serve. And it is intrinsic, it is in their DNA to protect. So first of all, thank you, Terrell, for your service. And I understand that you've seen it, you've protected people overseas, and so now how do you do it at home with a domestic problem? So number one, I would say it's understand that, again, there wouldn't be a supply if there wasn't a demand. And so educating yourself on how to speak out against the demand piece. And we have some partnerships that are coming up with an incredible organization called Be Men that we are going to be empowering the protectors and coming up with resourceful ways that you can get involved in your communities as a protector. So that's number one. Number two, I would say on the prevention side, you can combat the issue before it ever becomes an issue by volunteering in your community with vulnerable children, volunteering in underserved populations or underserved communities. The Boys and Girls Club of America is a great one that provides great mentorship opportunities. There are a number of those that you can just plug in to support a child who might be vulnerable. And I think that kind of piggybacks on what Tanya was saying. And number three is we understand that in the fight against trafficking, many men don't feel like they have a voice in the fight because, unfortunately, they're oftentimes viewed as the predator. But again, we recognize that there are the protectors. And so Safe House Project, because we raise awareness of sex trafficking and we raise funds to build up a network of safe houses, we are not the ones operating the safe houses. We fund those in the trenches doing the work. Mm-hmm. And so we put on mass market events to raise the money to filter down to these local organizations. So we are kind of one step removed from the programmatic side and working directly with the survivors, but we are still able to make a tremendous impact. And so if you want to volunteer with Safe House Project and go through speaker training to learn how to speak to the community about this issue and be plugged in as an ambassador, if you will, for the cause, and then take steps further to learn how to be part of this protectors group that we have coming up, then absolutely feel free to reach out. It's info@safehouseproject.org. So I think, again, you can plug in with Tanya and get involved directly with the survivors. You can be on the preventative side. You can be on the protective side. Or you can be on the kind of fundraising event side, which trickles down to providing services for victims.
Absolutely. Now, Christy, that's some great information. I know you're going to have to leave us. Any last thoughts and then contact information for us?
Sure. I think the one thing is that this issue will never be resolved until we recognize it for the epidemic that it is. Mm-hmm. There are, gun violence in schools is an atrocious issue that's getting a lot of national attention right now. And there were, according to data, there were 7,000 children that were injured or killed in gun-related incidences in 2018. And let me be very clear, that's a number that should not exist. But in comparison, there were 300,000 American children trafficked for sex last year. That means a child is 42 times more likely to be trafficked for sex than to be injured in a gun-related incident. Mm. This issue is, we refer to it many times as a silent epidemic. It is an issue that nobody wants to talk about. And until this comes into the light on a national scale, beyond just, hey, there's a problem, but when we need people who say there's a problem, but I get to be part of the solution in either awareness or prevention or restoration in whatever capacity, I don't believe that this issue will ever be resolved. And so we really firmly believe that every one person who stands up for this issue, every one person who is an advocate, every one person who knows the signs makes a difference. So I would just encourage you in any way that you can, plug in. These are not just kids overseas that this is happening to. These are our babies. These are our American children.
Right here
and
in
again,
America. Right.
we need to protect them. And if we don't fight for these victims, who will?
Right.
So,
and Christy,
thank you for having me.
Any contact information? Can they find more about Safe House on social media? Any specific numbers? Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you can get to all of our social media handles just by going directly to our website. Go to safehouseproject.org, and you can, again, plug to all of our social media. If you want to get involved, then email us at info@safehouseproject.org, and that will go out to the whole Safe House Project team, and we are very fast about getting back to folks. So thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Again, Christy Wells, CEO of Safe House Project. Christy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, and bye, Tanya. Bye.
And we will be right back.
It's Hampton Roads Voices on Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, I'm Benita Adams, and today we're talking about human and sex trafficking, and also adding the piece about labor trafficking as well. Our guest on the line we have right now, and we have had all hour long, all 2 hours actually, Tanya Street, the founder of Identifiable Me. Now, during the break, we were talking about some very interesting things, Tanya, and Christy, our previous guest, CEO of Safe House Project, really made the point that, of course, we talk about, everybody understands, most people understand stranger danger. Okay, don't go off with this person. I'm in the store. I'm going to watch you, those kinds of things. But she says that trafficker, that person doesn't walk through our front door. That person can be online. And you told me over the break that because this is the traffickers, this is his or her business, they can take it slowly. They can develop that relationship. So talk a little bit more about families and how we can be mindful of what's going on online with our children.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. Like I work with law enforcement, and I've seen them watch the internet and actually see predators online looking for kids who are having a bad day or had an argument with my parent, or, you know, they're looking for those things like that because those are vulnerabilities. And so one particular story was a young lady who had a great family. You know, it wasn't like there was something going on in the home, actually. And so she went over her girlfriend's house for the weekend. Mom knew the girlfriend, but mom didn't know the people that, you know, the girlfriend knew. Mom didn't know the people that she was attached to. Well, the young lady was complaining about how her mom wouldn't let her drive her car. And so this girl was like, oh, I know some people who got drugs, blah, blah, blah. We can go, you know, this weekend and go check it out, and I'm sure he'll let you drive. That, you know, to teenagers, that's fun.
Right.
She's getting to do what she wanted to do that her mom didn't let her do. And, of course, it's okay to be with the friend that she's with, but not understanding that the friend that she's with, her mom didn't know that she had these connections. You see what I'm saying?
I do,
so
yes.
This is how this young lady met her trafficker, who kept her out for an entire summer, and she actually spent her 18th birthday in a trafficking situation. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's so just know, like, do you know where your kids are, and do you know what they're doing? Because this isn't something that happens overnight, and we keep thinking that and not understanding that it's in our culture. You know, when you watch TV and you watch videos and you listen to music, it's you know, it's not a bad thing to make money using your moneymaker. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? That's you know. And so, but what we don't want, what I don't want kids doing that, thinking this is the way that I should be making money, because traffickers understand that if they have someone working for them and they're under 18, that's a federal offense. So it's not going to turn into much of a horror story, you know, when they're under 18. It's over 18 when it begins to get challenging and difficult, you know, and then there's the whole shame, you know, trying to walk away from a situation, which brings me to another point when I met this girl who was a stripper, and her trafficking situation happened because she was stripping. So because she was stripping, she was ashamed and felt bad about saying, I was trafficked through this situation. And so that experience continued to happen for her because she was afraid to come out, because people would say, well, why were you stripping in the first place?
Why were you stripping?
Up for that. And,
yes.
Right.
Oh, that's
and
almost
so,
like the woman who was raped. Well, your skirt was too short.
What were you wearing?
Your top
exactly.
was, your cleavage was showing. So you were looking for it, which is such a ridiculous thing to say, but that's exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah.
So you're saying that she was ashamed of this, and right. So it made it a little more difficult for her to reveal what was going on in her life? Right.
Exactly. Yeah, she didn't reveal it till years later after she got out of the situation herself, you know, but it was very traumatic for her. And so, and on college campuses, you know, I like to remind kids that are going to college that when you see that, you know, that guys being really promiscuous, or you see them going to parties, and, you know, you think it's all fun and games. But I know stories that I've been told from girls that are here in our college campuses here, you know, that they got caught up because they went to a party just to make a couple extra dollars.
Yes.
And then they were videotaped, and now they're videotaped, and now they're stuck. They can't get out of that, because if that gets turned in, they're going to lose their scholarship. So they just stay in it. You know, and there are quite a few stories that I heard like that. And so my thing is, and it's because the, you know, campus police, they're not fully trained on what that looks like. And, you know, so they don't feel that trust there to be able to say, hey, this is what happened to me. And so because that all is kind of there, just keeps this thing happening in this cycle. But what I want to say, especially to that girl who may be stripping, and then she went to the private room and was raped. You know, I've heard that story several times. You know, don't let that stop you from using your voice to say something was done that was wrong.
That was
wrong. Because it remains silent because of the shame. You know,
yes.
Most of the time, because of the shame that is put with it. But those things shouldn't happen to anybody.
No matter what they do for a living. Yeah. Exactly. Let me give that number out, 757-823-9110. We're talking about human and sex trafficking and the shame that goes along with it and why it's called the silent epidemic. And as our guest Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me, is saying that so many times girls get caught in this kind of cycle because of what's going on online, because they're videotaped, because it's not with the friend that the parent knows, but it's the friend of the friend that the parent doesn't know. And so those things are so important. What are your thoughts on this? 757-823-9110. Now, Tanya, I'm so glad you brought up the college student because, of course, WNSB Hot 91, we're here on the college campus of Norfolk State University. And as an instructor, I hear many times, I'm a poor college kid. I'm just a poor college kid. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. And you use the term money maker and to be caught up in that life saying, well, I just need a little extra money this semester and, I'll do it now and get out of it later. But you're saying that cycle and how they can be videotaped, or maybe they were on scholarship or financial aid or something like that, and they get caught. They get caught in the life and they don't know how to get out of it. Speak to that college student. Speak to that person, especially a freshman. Sometimes a first-time student comes here and they don't know they're from out of town, or their family member or their secure, those who they know depend on and they're secure with, they're not here. And so they're on their own for the very first time. Speak to that college student for us, please.
Yeah, it's it is hard, when you're trying to go to school and you really don't have time to work, and especially if you have had a past sexual trauma. In your mind, it's easy to be like, well, this already happened to me and there was no justice done, right? So I didn't deal with this issue in my life. This right here is not going to hurt me, and so it's a setup, for continual trauma where you're still not dealing with that past issue. So, I'm going to speak first to that. If you, are thinking that, if that is happening to you, then my suggestion would be go and get help for that previous trauma. Wow. Find a counselor to begin to unpeel that, because, if you're going to school and you're trying to, be in a place where, you're taking care of yourself, that needs to be dealt with anyway, because you need the capacity to grow. And you really don't have the capacity, internal capacity to grow and do the things you need to do. You're still holding on to your past. And so, I think about that a lot with my own life. My past pain was so present that I continued to make decisions from that pain. And so that's why I didn't understand red flags, or I was naive to certain situations and see them coming up on me because I was holding on to so much past trauma. So, but once I began to deal with that, I can make better decisions for my life, because I'm making it for my true self as to who I'm finding myself to be. So I'm making better decisions. So that would be, that would be bottom line. I always talk about creating a safe space, but that safe space starts with you. And so perhaps getting that help, you may be able to have the capacity to budget differently or to be creative. What other skills do you have? Maybe it's making oils or lotions or soaps or, jewelry or doing hair or, there's other things that, you can do and to help you make money to live while you're going to school. And so, and another thing, that's when I'm saying, what are you listening to? And, the music and reality TV, if you're listening to all of that and you're living that life like you need it in order to live, that's another signal, another red flag for you to say that, what about your life? Like, what are you doing for your life? Like, why are you feeding or letting this stuff feed you and helping you make decisions and telling you what to do with your life? Don't let media tell you what to do. Because that, in my mind, that's what it's set up to do. It's set up to tell society what they want, what they desire.
Right.
So don't let that be the case.
Don't let that be the case.
Back.
Right. And it's such an important point that I really want to make sure any young college students, if they're listening, or their parents or guardians, grandparents, or what have you, that is such an important point to realize that there are many other options out there, but we've got to not come, as you said, from past pain, because that's almost like when you come out of a relationship, you're not thinking clearly, and not at first. And so you've got to get your mind and your heart right. And so that's important, and giving them options in terms of, it doesn't have to be this way. Perhaps there are other things that you can do. Now, we have talked about a little bit earlier in our show about this intuition, and when the hairs, I think Christy had said, when the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. How can a person, when she sees that this relationship is going in the wrong way, any kind of identifiers, anything that she says something's wrong here, or I thought it was this and it seems to be headed in a totally different direction, what might that look like?
Well, that's really hard because, again, we're living in a world where, kids and young adults, and, we're looking at TV, and TV tells us what to do. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not easy. It's not easy to tap into ourselves and really understand that our tuition is talking to us, or understand that that's a red flag. So again, it goes into internal work and understanding that everything you go through is an experience, and it's a lesson in life, and to learn from it. And so we want to try to keep ourselves out of harm's way and life situations, but truth is, life happens. So when things happen, how do you come out of that, and how do you continue to live and make better decisions for yourself? Right. And to me, that, having people in your life that have lived experiences and listening to their advice. And, that's how you can measure or can say, or can think and say, well, maybe the situation I'm in, who are the people around you that you're able to go to confidently and truthfully and say, these are the issues that I'm having. If you don't have anybody like that, you should, especially if you know that you're dealing with past hurt in your own life. You need people in your life to help support you if you can't get through your own stuff. And so whether that be a counselor or, just someone with some wisdom, to help you, because you're not going to see it. A person with trauma being in these relationships, they're not going to think with that rational mind to say, oh, this isn't good for me, because they may not understand their own value and what is good for them. Right. Maybe that's all they know, so they're not going to think that way.
They won't see their own
that's
value.
Who I'm speaking to. When I'm speaking to that girl who maybe, she grew up, seeing her mom in situations like this, so it's not foreign. Where us looking on, we're like, no, you don't want to be in that situation. She's like, I'm fine. We fight, yeah, but we get over it and we make up and it's good. Mm-hmm. And so it's not what's foreign to us won't be foreign to a person when this is their environment, and that's the truth. That is just the truth. And so, I'm saying to that person who may not be sure about the relationship he or she is in, look at yourself, and if you really don't have people speaking into your life who are wise, find those people, whether they be teachers or counselors or, just someone who has a little bit of wisdom that you can kind of run some things by, to see, to just get their advice.
I completely agree. We're talking to Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me. Our topic is human and sex trafficking, and our number 757-823-9110. We'll be back right after this break. This is Hot 91.
Is Hampton Roads Voices. Hot 91.
If you're just joining us, welcome to Hampton Roads Voices. Today we're talking about human and sex and labor trafficking. Now, we know this is a very sensitive topic, and it's hard to talk about it. And in fact, that's why it's called the silent epidemic, because it's difficult, it's challenging, and yet we know it's very important to talk about it. And Hampton Roads, it being one of the hubs of sex trafficking, it is so important to hear from you. So our number is 757-823-9110. What are your thoughts on this? What do you need to know to keep your kids safe, and especially in a digital space? 757-823-9110. We still have on the line with us our guest, Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me. And so, Tanya, you've been giving us so much great information. You talked about the college student. You talked about the culture, even and black and brown girls, and especially this digital space, and finding someone who can help us, someone we can hear from, that person can hear from. And so we had talked about a little bit during the break. We were saying so many times that we've heard these cases in the news stories that a young person has been creating devices in their bedroom, or they have an arsenal of weapons in the garage or something like that, and the parent had no idea. They had no idea what was going on. But then I also hear a parent perhaps saying, but I want to give my kids some privacy. That's their room, that's their garage, that's their this. And so I didn't really want to go in there and feel like I was imposing upon him or her. Talk to that parent who perhaps needs to say, maybe it's not about your privacy.
Right. Yeah. You know, I raised teens, and we didn't do that at all. You know, I pay the bills, and you know, I pay the mortgage. You know, and so and I understood that not that this is a child to mean anything in a degrading way, because it's a beautiful thing to be a child, but to just kind of create this atmosphere in my home where they could be kids, because that's what they should be. And I'm the parent, and because I'm the parent, I have responsibility, you know, and so in my response to that, having that responsibility, why are we even talking about privacy? You know, when it comes to what's yours and mine, there is no us and them. We're doing this together because we are family.
Right.
And so, you know, for when it comes down to, you know, taking a shower, I mean, you know, simple things, of course, that goes without saying because you're growing. But, you know, I can come into the room that you live in our house that I pay for anytime I want to. You know, now I may show you how to be respectful, because I'm a guide and I'm a teacher, and I'm going to tap on your door because I want you to learn that as a way of just respecting people. But, you know, and so everything that I did in my home, it was intentional to teach them, you know, this is how you respect someone, you know, but most of all, we're talking about respect, you know, is teaching kids how to respect themselves, and how to respect others, you know, and so having those conversations when they're like, well, I want my privacy, but I probably heard that on TV or at school somewhere. It's easy to correct that because this is our home. And I would say to my kids all the time, hate me now, love me later. Right. And you may not love me later, but it's okay. You know, this is my job, this is my role, and I take it seriously, you know, and you're here to learn from me. And that's their parent. They were brought here through that parent, and this is what they have over there, and you came through me. And so it was on purpose that I am your parent, and these are my ways, and this is the way we're going to do it, and that's it, you know. And so, but setting that foundation, my kids understood me, and I understood them. So I didn't say it in a disrespectful way, because I don't want them to, you know, to disrespect others. Am I making sense? Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Absolutely, because you are their guide and teacher, and so you teach them to respect themselves and to respect others, which would help. So we're kind of winding down to the end of the show. So what can we do to reduce this type of crime? And then we'll look at some specific resources. So what can be done? We've talked about the issue. We've talked about the problem. What are some of the solutions?
Well, again, you know, just be yourself, you know, be yourself to your kids and let them see the authenticity and what it's like to just be. And we don't practice that. You know, I talk a lot about, you know, church, and one of the things that I didn't learn in church was how to love myself. And that was the hardest thing for me, how to just love myself. And so, you know, teach self-love to yourself. You know, if you don't have that, but also to your kids. Because just in doing that, I'm just reminded, when I was with my trafficker, you know, we recruited. I used to recruit for other girls to come into, you know, to a trafficking situation. So there would be times where my trafficker, you know, one particular time I pointed one girl, and he looked. He says, don't mess with her. You know, she's not going to come into this. And so when I look back on that and I look at that situation, I understand now that she was a confident girl. He already knew I can't manipulate her.
Wow.
She's well intact. She's confident. I can't pull. That's going to take too long. I need someone who has low self-esteem. I need someone who believes, where I can pull them in on a certain way. And, I need a particular, type of vulnerability to make it easier for us, as we're making money, because that's what we were doing, right? And so, so make sure your kids are confident. So don't tear them down. Because the trafficker, when they're getting them, that they're going to tell them the opposite as to what you're telling them. So make sure you're complimenting your kids. Make sure you're telling them, helping them understand who they are, making sure they're confident, their esteem is high, and get them tutors for school. I mean, whatever it is that your kids need, if they want to do ballet or this or that, really support them. Don't just throw money at them, but really find out who your kids are. You know who they are because you birthed them. You know their skills and their strengths and their things that are not so strong. You know those things. Don't tear them down. Build them up because they're kings and queens. You're raising fathers and mothers, and to be good fathers and mothers. So if you don't do that, someone else will tell them who they are. If they don't know who they are.
And sometimes we say, oh, no, I don't want to exaggerate my kids' strengths and weaknesses and don't want to tell them these things. I want to tell them the reality of life. And yes, there is reality in life. As you said, life happens. But they also need to have some sense of, I am valuable. I am a queen.
Yeah.
I am a king. I am loved because, again, somebody out there is looking to do the opposite of what of what they should hear and say.
Yeah.
And so that is so important. So what are some resources? Somebody says, okay, I'm in this situation. I need to get out. I want to help someone in this situation to help them get out. Where can they go? Give us a few resources, please.
Okay, so everybody right now can pull out their phones or their computers, wherever they are, laptops or wherever they are, and they can look up the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And I actually have it as a contact in my phone, and it's 1-888-373-7888. So it's 888-373-7888. And if you see something or you have, like we're talking about that moment where you're like, something isn't right here.
Right.
And you don't have to decide that it's right or wrong. You just feel like something's wrong and it's trafficking or, someone, could be labor. You could be at the ocean front and you're seeing a lot of men coming in and out of one particular hotel room. Call the number. And when you call the number, you can either leave your name or be anonymous and just say what you see, the location or however much information you have, and then they will contact the authorities. And so that number is 888-373-7888. Even if you yourself, and usually a person who's in this situation is not going to call, but maybe you are a friend of someone and they're in a situation that they don't need to be in because they can't see it. They don't see themselves as a victim. They feel like they're doing this every weekend and they're making money, but you're seeing some things that they're putting themselves in a situation that is dangerous. And you see it as a friend. Just call the number.
Just call the number.
This is, my girl, I see her here. She's been in this room too long, and I'm afraid to call the police, and so I'm just calling 888-373-7888.
Oh, my gosh. What a important resource because, again, sometimes you see it, you think, wait a minute, that girl looks like she's 12. And then that can't be her father. So I find that very important. Again, you can stay anonymous. Any other, before we get your contact information, any other resources that you really would like to share with our listeners?
No, that would be the biggest and best for me because all local resources are connected to that number. And so when you're calling that number, you can also call that number to get local resources. And, but here in the area, really I speak big on, bringing law enforcement, like I said, out to your community meetings, to your schools, PTA meetings, to your churches, and to really understand the culture of human trafficking, the history of human trafficking, so you truly understand it. So we can honestly change our lives and do better. All of us, don't just be mad at the trafficker. We buy into exploitation as well.
We do.
And so.
Tanya, how can they find you? Contact information, social media?
Yes, I'm definitely on Instagram. Identifiable Me is on Instagram. Identifiable Me is on Facebook. And you can email me, Tanya at identifiableme.org.
Absolutely. This has been Tanya Street, founder of Identifiable Me. Tanya, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and insight and your just eloquence in sharing your story and talking about how important this issue is. Tanya, thank you again, from founder of Identifiable Me. Thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Bye-bye. Earlier, we had Christy Wells. She is the CEO of Safe House Project. And again, let me give you that number one more time. The hotline for the National Human Trafficking, 888-373-7888. Such an important number. As she said, if you see something, call. You can remain anonymous. 888-373-7888. So we thank you for being with us today on Hampton Roads Voices. We know the topic has been very challenging and difficult, but it's so important to talk about what's going on in our own community. So if you see something, please jump in and get involved. So we're here every Friday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Don't forget, if you need to hear or want to hear this broadcast again, we rebroadcast this every Sunday from 12 to 2. You can contact me if you're interested in having us share a topic. My number, or my email address, I should say, is bkadams@nsu.edu. There's something you want to talk about, you want us to address, bkadams@nsu.edu. And don't forget, we're at Hot 91 Online. We're at Hot 91 Online. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and you can also hear the shows again and again on our YouTube channel. So thanks again for being with us. It really has been my pleasure. We will see you again next time. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not those of Norfolk State University or WNSB FM. Thank you for listening.